the rocket that reached for the stars. On October 3, 1942, a slender missile climbed into the sky above Peenemünde, a secret facility on Germany's Baltic coast. The A-4 rocket, later known as the V-2, became the first human-made object to reach space, crossing the Kármán line at 100 kilometers above Earth's surface. It was a technological marvel, achieving what scientists had dreamed of for decades. It was also a weapon of terror. Over the course of the war, more than 3,000 V-2 rockets rained down on Allied cities, primarily London and Antwerp. Each missile traveled faster than the speed of sound, giving no warning before impact. The explosions killed approximately 9,000 civilians. But the human cost extended far beyond those killed by the weapon itself. The V-2 program relied on slave labor. At the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp, prisoners worked in underground factories under conditions of unimaginable brutality. They labored for 12 hours a day with minimal food, subjected to beatings, hangings, and arbitrary executions. Conservative estimates suggest that 20,000 people died producing the V-2 rockets, more than twice the number killed by the weapons themselves. The architect of this program was Wernher von Braun, a brilliant engineer who joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and the SS in 1940. After the war, von Braun and hundreds of his colleagues were brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip, a secret program that whitewashed the records of Nazi scientists deemed valuable to American interests. Their past was systematically obscured. Their expertise was desperately wanted. Von Braun became the face of America's space program. He appeared on television with Walt Disney, promoting the dream of space exploration to millions of American families. He designed the Saturn V rocket that carried Apollo 11 to the moon in 1969. When Neil Armstrong took his famous first step, he did so atop technology that traced its lineage directly to the V-2, to Peenemünde, to the underground factories where enslaved workers died by the thousands. Today, every satellite that provides GPS navigation, every weather forecast derived from orbital observation, every space telescope that peers into the cosmic past, all of these depend on rocket technology pioneered under the Nazi regime. The International Space Station orbits Earth using principles refined in those wartime laboratories. Private companies launching commercial satellites stand on foundations built by men who wore SS uniforms. This is not to say that rocketry would never have developed without the Nazi program. Scientists around the world were pursuing similar goals. But the historical reality is undeniable. The massive resources, the forced labor, the complete absence of ethical constraints allowed the Nazi rocket program to advance further and faster than any contemporary effort. We inherited that advancement, and with it, an uncomfortable moral debt. The jet engine's dark genesis. On August 27, 1939, just days before Germany invaded Poland, a small aircraft lifted off from an airfield in northeastern Germany. The Heinkel He-178 was unremarkable in appearance, but it possessed no propeller. Instead, it was powered by a turbojet engine, making it the world's first jet-powered aircraft to fly successfully. The jet engine represented a fundamental leap in aviation technology. Traditional piston engines and propellers had physical limitations that capped aircraft speed at around 450 miles per hour. Jets, by contrast, could achieve speeds that made them nearly impossible to intercept with conventional fighters. The potential military applications were immediately obvious. By 1944, Germany had deployed the Messerschmitt Me-262, the first operational jet fighter. With a top speed of over 540 miles per hour, it could easily outpace Allied aircraft. Fortunately for the Allies, the Me-262 arrived too late and in too few numbers to alter the war's outcome. But its impact on the future of aviation was profound. After the war, both the United States and the Soviet Union scrambled to acquire German jet technology and the engineers who developed it. The knowledge gained from captured German aircraft and documents accelerated jet development on both sides of the Iron Curtain by years, perhaps decades. The F-86 Sabre, America's primary fighter in the Korean War, incorporated swept-wing designs pioneered by German aerodynamicists. Soviet jets followed similar evolutionary paths, built on foundations laid in Nazi research facilities. Today, commercial aviation is entirely dependent on jet engine technology. Every Boeing 737, every Airbus A380, every regional jet that connects smaller cities to major hubs, all rely on principles of jet propulsion first successfully demonstrated by Nazi Germany. The modern turbofan engines that power these aircraft are refinements of the original German designs, more efficient and far more reliable, but fundamentally similar in their core operation. Global commerce, international tourism, rapid emergency response, the ability to visit family across continents, all of these aspects of modern life rest on technology that emerged from a regime dedicated to conquest and genocide. The passengers who board flights every day, scrolling through their phones as they wait for takeoff, are unknowing beneficiaries of innovations developed to rain destruction on enemy cities. The synthetic materials revolution. In the 1930s, Germany faced a strategic problem. The nation lacked natural resources essential for modern industry and warfare. There was limited access to natural rubber, insufficient petroleum reserves, and dependence on foreign suppliers for materials that any industrial power required. The Nazi solution was autarky, economic self-sufficiency through synthetic alternatives. German chemists, many working for the industrial conglomerate IG Farben, developed synthetic rubber, known as Buna. They created synthetic fuels through the Fischer-Tropsch process, converting coal into liquid hydrocarbons. They refined techniques for producing synthetic fibers, plastics, and other petroleum-derived materials without access to significant oil fields. IG Farben was intimately connected with the Nazi war machine and the Holocaust. The company built a massive factory complex at Auschwitz III Monowitz, using concentration camp prisoners as slave labor. Workers died from exhaustion, starvation, and abuse. Those who became too weak to work were sent to the gas chambers at nearby Birkenau. The company's leadership was deeply complicit in these crimes. After the war, 24 IG Farben executives were tried at Nuremberg, with 13 convicted of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Yet the chemical innovations that emerged from this system became foundational to the modern world. Synthetic rubber is now ubiquitous, used in everything from automobile tires to medical equipment. The global economy would collapse without it. Natural rubber production could never meet current demand, and the strategic vulnerabilities that drove German research in the 1930s remain relevant today. Synthetic materials derived from petrochemicals, plastics, nylons, polyesters, saturate contemporary life. The clothing we wear, the containers that hold our food, the components of our electronic devices, the medical supplies that save lives in hospitals, many of these rely on chemical processes refined or pioneered during the Nazi era. The drive for autarky, born from aggressive militarism and preparation for conquest, inadvertently laid groundwork for the materials science revolution of the late 20th century. The pharmaceutical industry, too, bears marks of this period. Companies that conducted human experiments in concentration camps, that tested drugs on prisoners without consent or anesthesia, that actively participated in the machinery of murder, these same companies evolved into modern pharmaceutical giants. Their research, tainted though it was by unspeakable crimes, contributed to medical knowledge that persists. We must be clear, none of this justifies what was done. The suffering inflicted cannot be balanced against technological gain. But we must also acknowledge that the technologies we use daily are not morally neutral. They carry histories we would prefer to forget. Medical knowledge and the ethics of using tainted data. Perhaps no aspect of Nazi scientific legacy generates more visceral discomfort than medical research. Nazi doctors conducted experiments on concentration camp prisoners that violated every ethical principle of medical practice. Subjects were infected with diseases, exposed to extreme temperatures, subjected to high-altitude pressure tests, and tortured in the name of research. These experiments were not aberrations committed by rogue individuals. They were systematic, approved at the highest levels, and documented with clinical precision. Dr. Joseph Mengel's experiments at Auschwitz became synonymous with Nazi medical atrocities, but he was far from alone. At Dachau, prisoners were immersed in ice water to study hypothermia, part of research intended to help German pilots shot down over the North Sea. At Ravensbrück, women were deliberately infected with bacteria and subjected to experimental surgeries without anesthesia. At numerous camps, prisoners were exposed to phosgene and mustard gas to test potential treatments. After the war, the question arose, what should be done with data obtained through these experiments? The information existed. In some cases, It was the only data available on certain physiological responses to extreme conditions. Some argued that using the data would honor the victims by ensuring their suffering produced some benefit. Others insisted that using such data legitimized the methods by which it was obtained and violated the memory of those who were murdered. This debate has never been fully resolved. Some researchers have cited Nazi hypothermia studies when developing treatments for cold water immersion. Others have referenced Nazi aviation medicine in contexts of high-altitude physiology. In most cases, modern researchers argue that the Nazi data is scientifically flawed due to the extreme conditions, lack of controls, and the compromised health of subjects. But the question remains: when data exists, however it was obtained, does the potential to save future lives justify its use? The Nuremberg doctors' trial of 1946 to 1947 attempted to address these questions by establishing clear ethical standards for human experimentation. The Nuremberg Code, which emerged from the trial, established principles of informed consent, scientific necessity, and the right of subjects to withdraw from experiments. These principles became foundational to modern medical ethics and influenced documents like the Declaration of Helsinki and the regulations governing human subjects research worldwide. In this sense, the horrific experiments conducted by Nazi doctors led directly to the ethical frameworks that now protect research participants. Modern institutional review boards, informed consent procedures, and the entire apparatus of research ethics can be traced to revulsion at what was done in Nazi concentration camps. The protection of human dignity in medical research is a direct response to its utter violation under the swastika. This represents a genuine transformation, not of the crimes themselves, which remain monstrous, but of the standards by which we judge research. The victims of Nazi medical experiments did not die in vain if their suffering led to principles that protect others. But this, too, is a deeply uncomfortable truth. Our ethical progress was purchased with their agony. The Volkswagen and industrial innovation. In 1937, the German Labor Front established an automobile company with a specific mandate: produce an affordable car for the masses. The vehicle was called the Kraft durch Freude Wagen, or Strength Through Joy car, a reference to the Nazi leisure organization. The car would eventually become known by another name, the Volkswagen, or People's Car. The Volkswagen Beetle, designed with input from Ferdinand Porsche, became one of the most successful automobiles in history. Production continued until 2003, with over 21 million units manufactured. The car became an icon of post-war German recovery, a symbol of democratic economic prosperity and industrial quality. But the Volkswagen company was created by the Nazi state. The factory was built using forced labor. During the war, it produced military vehicles and weapons rather than civilian cars. Thousands of forced laborers, including prisoners of war and concentration camp inmates, worked in Volkswagen facilities under brutal conditions. The company did not begin producing civilian vehicles for general consumption until after the war ended. Like many German industrial concerns that survived the war, Volkswagen underwent a process of denazification that was more cosmetic than substantial. Key figures with Nazi connections often remained in positions of influence. The company's history was carefully managed to emphasize post-war success rather than wartime complicity. Today, Volkswagen Group is one of the world's largest automobile manufacturers, producing not just Volkswagens but also Audis, Porsches, and other brands. The company has acknowledged its history and established funds for former forced laborers, but the essential fact remains: a company created by the Nazi regime, built with slave labor, became a pillar of the modern global economy. This pattern repeated across German industry. Companies like BMW, Daimler-Benz, and Siemens all used forced labor during the war. All emerged from the conflict to become major international corporations. The economic miracle of post-war West Germany was built, in part, on continuity with wartime industrial infrastructure and expertise. The global economy is deeply interconnected with companies that have Nazi-era histories. When someone purchases a German-engineered car, they are buying from a company that may have been complicit in wartime atrocities. The engineering excellence for which German manufacturing is known has roots that extend into the darkest period of the nation's history. Computing and the analytical engine of war. Konrad Zuse was an engineer who, in 1941, completed the Z3, the world's first programmable, fully automatic digital computer. Zeus was not a Nazi. He remained relatively apolitical throughout the war. But his work was funded by the German government and intended for aeronautical research calculations. The Z-3 was destroyed in Allied bombing in 1943, and Zeus's subsequent machines never achieved the impact they might have under different circumstances. While the Z-3's direct influence on modern computing is debatable, it represents how Nazi Germany, for all its ideological rejection of certain types of Jewish physics and modern art, nevertheless pursued technological innovation with great intensity. The regime's investments in technology, even when they failed or arrived too late to affect the war's outcome, contributed to the global pool of knowledge that would explode in the post-war period. More significantly, the end of the war brought Operation Paperclip and similar programs through which Allied powers recruited German scientists and engineers. These individuals brought not just knowledge of specific technologies but also methodological approaches, organizational structures, and research priorities that shaped Cold War science. The space race, missile development, aeronautics, and numerous other fields were influenced by German scientists working in American and Soviet institutions. The computing revolution of the late 20th century does not trace directly to Nazi innovations in the way that rocketry does. But it emerged from a post-war scientific establishment that had absorbed and integrated German researchers, German methods, and German organizational approaches to complex technical problems. The scientific community is international, and knowledge flows across borders, but the specific paths that knowledge took were shaped by the war and its immediate aftermath.